Tatiana Schlossberg lived much of her life under a famous name, but she spent her career looking beyond it. A journalist, author, and environmental campaigner, she was known for her sharp writing, her curiosity, and her determination to explain complex ideas in human terms. She has died at the age of 35, following a battle with an aggressive form of cancer, her family has confirmed. Her death was announced on Tuesday in a statement shared by the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. It prompted an outpouring of tributes from journalists, environmentalists, and public figures across the United States and beyond, many of whom spoke not only of her work, but of her warmth, generosity, and clarity of purpose. Schlossberg was the daughter of Caroline Kennedy, the former U.S. ambassador to Australia and Japan, and Edwin Schlossberg, a designer and author. She was also the granddaughter of President John F. Kennedy, a connection that followed her throughout her life. Yet those who worked closely with her say she was determined not to be defined by her family's history, or by the expectations that came with it. Born in New York City in May 1990, Tatiana Celia Kennedy Schlossberg grew up surrounded by public service, politics, and constant media attention. The Kennedy name carried immense weight, as well as a long legacy of tragedy. From an early age, she showed a desire to understand the world on her own terms, drawn not directly to politics, but to writing, history, and science. She studied history at Yale University, where she was known as a thoughtful and diligent student, before continuing her education at the University of Oxford. Friends from that period recall someone deeply engaged with ideas, but also quietly humorous, observant, and unassuming in manner. Rather than stepping immediately into public life, Schlossberg chose journalism. She worked as a reporter for the New York Times, where she covered climate change, science, and the environment. Her reporting focused on the everyday realities of a warming world, often examining how ordinary habits, systems, and choices contributed to much larger global problems. Colleagues described her as meticulous and fair, someone who asked difficult questions without drama or self-importance. She was particularly interested in how policy, economics, and personal behavior intersected, and how individuals could be both part of the problem and part of the solution. That interest culminated in her 2019 book, Inconspicuous Consumption: The Environmental Impact You Don't Know You Have. In it, Schlossberg explored the hidden environmental costs of modern life, from data storage and fast fashion to food waste and energy use. Rather than scolding readers, she aimed to inform them, believing that awareness was a necessary first step towards meaningful change. In interviews at the time, including one with NBC's Today program, she spoke candidly about her own contradictions. She acknowledged that no one lives perfectly sustainably, and that guilt alone was not a useful motivator. Her goal, she said, was to make environmental issues feel tangible and human, rather than abstract, technical, or overwhelming. The book was well received, praised for its clarity, balance, and restraint. Reviewers noted that Schlossberg avoided alarmism, choosing instead to guide readers through the consequences of modern convenience with a calm, evidence-based approach that respected their intelligence. Away from her professional life, she married George Moran, a former college classmate. Together they built a life largely out of the public eye. Friends describe her as devoted to her family, fiercely protective of her private life, and deeply grounded despite her public profile. In November last year, Schlossberg published a deeply personal essay in The New Yorker that revealed she had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of acute myeloid leukemia. The diagnosis came shortly after the birth of her second child, following routine blood tests that showed dangerously high white blood cell counts. In the essay, she wrote with striking honesty about the shock of becoming seriously ill while caring for a newborn. She described the disorienting shift from planning a future to confronting mortality, and the surreal experience of navigating intensive medical treatment while still adjusting to motherhood. Doctors identified a mutation of the disease more commonly seen in older patients, one that carried a poor prognosis. Schlossberg underwent multiple rounds of chemotherapy, took part in clinical trials, and received 2 stem cell transplants. She documented not only the physical toll of treatment, but the emotional strain, the waiting, and the uncertainty that came with prolonged illness. Yet even in illness, she remained a journalist at heart. She questioned the systems around her, from hospital routines to pharmaceutical research, and reflected on how medical decisions were made. In one of the most striking passages of her essay, she criticized cuts to scientific research funding, including decisions linked to her cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who serves as U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services. Her writing was unsparing but measured. It was not an attack, but a plea for evidence, investment, and compassion. She wrote about the quiet heroism of nurses, the exhaustion of long hospital nights, and the strange intimacy of life lived almost entirely in treatment rooms. The essay resonated widely. Readers praised its clarity, its courage, and its refusal to sentimentalize suffering. For many, it served as a reminder of Schlossberg's unique voice, able to combine deeply personal experience with wider social and political questions. In announcing her death, her family described her as beautiful and said she would always be in our hearts. The statement was signed by her husband, their 2 children, her parents, and her siblings. It was brief, and in keeping with the family's long-standing desire for privacy at moments of loss.
Understanding climate change as a local phenomenon, a regional one, a global one, and a cultural one is what makes me see this problem as a collective one. So, which brings me to my book, which is about exactly that. Many of us think about climate change in terms of hurricanes and other natural disasters, or else utilities and fossil fuels and airplane travel and red meat. And those are all really important things to think about. But what usually doesn't rise to the surface is everyday, run-of-the-mill stuff, including literal stuff, a pair of jeans, a hamburger, Netflix, or an air conditioner.
Tributes soon followed. Maria Shriver, a journalist and Schlossberg's cousin, spoke of her loving kindness and her ability to bring warmth and joy into difficult spaces.
And for people who think that they're not science people or don't understand utilities, talking about climate change on this scale can help make the issue relatable and bring it down to the scale of our own lives and have it make sense kind of in the context of how we move through the world. So in my book, I wrote about 4 areas: the internet and technology, food, fashion, and fuel, to explore environmental problems that we don't often hear about, and hopefully to help readers understand that our lives are inextricable from this problem.
Former colleagues highlighted her integrity and commitment to truth, while environmental advocates pointed to the lasting impact of her work. For the Kennedy family, Schlossberg's death represents another painful chapter in a history marked by public service and repeated tragedy. Yet those closest to her are keen to stress that her life should not be defined by its end, nor by the family she was born into. She carved out her own path, choosing substance over spectacle. She believed in facts, in explanation, and in the power of careful language. In an age of noise, outrage, and instant opinion, her work stood out for its restraint. Tatiana Schlossberg is survived by her husband, George Moran, and their 2 young children, as well as her parents and siblings. Her writing continues to be read and shared, offering insight into both the environmental challenges of modern life and the deeply personal experience of serious illness. In many ways, her legacy lies not in headlines, but in the quiet influence of thoughtful journalism. She asked readers to look more closely at the world around them, to notice the unseen costs of convenience, and to approach complex problems with humility and care. For someone born into one of America's most famous families, Tatiana Schlossberg chose a life of listening, questioning, and explaining. And through her words, she leaves behind a record of a mind committed to understanding, and a voice that will continue to be heard.
Will be required to fight it, and making sure that those things happen. So now I'm going to talk about a few examples of what I mean. I often get asked, what surprised me the most in writing about this book, and other than everything that I learned, I usually say the internet. Sorry, I'm excited. So as somebody who has very limited knowledge of computers and technology, it had never occurred to me that the internet had any kind of environmental impact at all. But as I kind of learned more about it, I learned that the internet is a very physical system. It's made up of wires and cables and modems and blinking routers around the world, but we so often talk about it as the cloud and know that our devices are wireless, so it's very easy to forget that it is a very tangible system. And in the US, it's built on top of other very physical systems, the Transcontinental Railroad,